Yo, what's up, everybody? It's DFS Dudes back for the Tuesday edition of the NBA Deep Dive. Today is Tuesday, March 3rd. It's a big slate today to get into. Nailed some picks yesterday, nailed some value guys, nailed some under-owned guys. Had the slate pretty much locked down and it played out the way that we thought it would play out. So let's move on to today. Again, it's a big slate, 8 games on this slate. Really good tournament on FanDuel. Not often do you see them go back to the old pricing structure of a $3 tournament with a monster prize, and they just opened a second one that has a $20,000 first place for $3.33. Everybody's all in on trade day. I love 3-3 March 3rd is a really good day. I'm max entered in those. Let's try and have a good night, man. I'll give you kind of what I'm thinking tonight, where my cores are, what kind of lineup builds I'm getting into. But before we do that, let's get into matchups and over-unders and injuries. Karl Anthony Towns is out. Ben Simmons is out. Joel Embiid is out. Steph Curry will not play yet. Aldridge has been ruled out. Kyrie Irving is out. Anthony Davis is questionable, but more towards probable. Jason Tatum is out. Tatum, 23.5 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 2.9 assists, along with 1.3 steals. There's a lot to be made up there. A lot of people will look at Jaylen Brown. Kemba Walker, probable. He'll return. De'Aaron Fox, probable. Marcus Smart, dealing with an illness as well. He's probable. Smart, if he would have been out, it would have been we would have been getting into some value there, like with Wanamaker and those guys. But I think a lot of, Enes Kanter and Tice are going to be a couple of guys that perhaps go under-owned, but maybe slide into a little extra minutes without Jason Tatum on the floor. Draymond Green, he's been listed out. You still got Rashawn Holmes and Marvin Bagley out in Sacramento. There's a whole host of stuff today from an injury standpoint. Oubre, news on Oubre today, he's going to be out. He's undergoing knee surgery. Zach LaVine's expected to miss a week. Chris Dunn, he's out for the season. Kevon Looney, he's not playing. Draymond, like I said, he's out. There's a ton of injuries that kind of broke today, with games relevant for tonight's slate and then games for tomorrow's slate as well. So let's look at the over-unders. There are some high over-unders on this slate. The highest over-under, we talked about it on the deep dive. We talked about in the morning shoot-around, was Minnesota and the Pelicans, and that's 247. And the second highest over-under is 14 points lower than that, and that's Washington at Sacramento. So you've got a 247 over-under here, which is 14 points higher than any other game on the slate, and you have to give that credence. You have to get exposure to that game. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When there's a game on the slate, and we've talked about it before, that is 14 points higher than the next highest game, you've just got to get exposure to it. Washington, Sacramento, like I said, 233.5. That's the second highest. The Clippers and the Thunder, 226. Toronto and Phoenix, 225. Again, they will not have Kelly Oubre, who's going to have knee surgery. And I think that opens up a really strong value play. A guy that's gotten some minutes this year. A guy that's been a solid play, and that's Mikal Bridges. He's 5,700 on FanDuel. Oubre is not going to be there. He's been playing 38 minutes. He played 38 minutes against the Clippers, 37 against Detroit, 38 against the Warriors, 30 fantasy points, 32 fantasy points, 26 fantasy points. He's had at least 30 fantasy points in 3 of the last 5 games. So Mikal Bridges, I think, is a really good play in this spot. I do like Siakam still. Oubre is not a great defender, but he's a long defender. You remove him from the floor, and Siakam to me seems like he's in a really good spot tonight as well. Positional matchups, and here's kind of where guys rank against defenders and what the team is giving up. De'Aaron Fox in an outstanding spot with a 30% usage rate against Washington, who's the worst on-ball defender, and they have the worst defense against point guards on the slate. And Washington in this game with Sacramento with the second highest over-under and implied total for Sacramento at 119.5. Another really good matchup is D'Angelo Russell, 32.5 usage rate, and it's a middle of the road matchup as far as defense, as far as defender goes, but that 32.5 usage rate, and it's going to be an up-tempo game there. It's going to be a fast-paced game with a lot of points scored. And, Russell, I think, is another good play on FanDuel. He's eligible as a shooting guard. It gives you an opportunity to get a third point guard in the mix. Jamal Murray's in a good spot against the Warriors. I just don't know if there's enough in that game on the road. If it was at Chase Center in Oakland, I'd like Jamal Murray more than I like him now. It's a fair price tag, 6,700 on DK, 6,900 on FanDuel. Only a 25.3 usage rate. Really good matchup, both against a defender and against a team giving up fantasy points to a point guard. I just don't know how much is there. The spread in this one is enormous. You've got Denver is minus 15.5. So I just don't know if there's enough there. The shooting guard position, Galidas Alexander, as far as a team that gives points up to shooting guards, the Clippers, that's one spot they've given it up to. From a defender standpoint, it's not a great matchup. Drew Holiday, however, in a really good matchup in an up-tempo game. He's a really good price on both sides, 7,900 on DraftKings, 8,100 on FanDuel. You could possibly look at Damian Lee, who's in a good spot against a team who gives up fantasy points to that spot, but I'd rather go to Cody Martin against the Spurs on a back-to-back. It's just a better matchup. We know the situation there in Charlotte. We know Cody Martin's been a guy we've leaned on all year. And then you can also look at Jaylen Brown. Really good matchup. He already goes into this game with a 23.9 usage rate. He will get a bump. And then, Bradley Beal, the matchup's not fantastic, but this is one of those spots where Bradley Beal could put up 60 fantasy points. 10-4 on DraftKings, 10-3 on FanDuel, 35.3 usage rate, going against the Kings who like to run up and down the floor and not play defense. Seems like a match made in heaven. Second highest over-under on the slate. Small forward position, on FanDuel, Kawhi Leonard is listed as a power forward. He's got a 34.5 usage rate. He's the only guy that's playable if you want to talk about playing anybody on the Clippers, in my opinion. Paul George is going to have a game where he's going to go bonkers, and his price tag is at 6,800. In deep format tournaments, I don't mind you getting a limited exposure to Paul George. But from a small forward standpoint, Kawhi Leonard is eating all the usage up. He's just eating all the usage up. Brandon Ingram in a really nice matchup. DeMar DeRozan in a decent matchup against Charlotte. He's the only guy that you could bank on for minutes in San Antonio. Small forward is a little bit ugly tonight. The power forward position, PJ Washington, Trey Lyles, Yancho Hernangomez, Zion Williamson with the top matchups. And surprisingly, the usage rate for Zion Williamson is 31.4, averaging 1.28 fantasy points per minute. You look at, fantasy points per game right now, he's averaging 37 fantasy points per game in 28.9 minutes and 8.2 price tag. I think he's popular in this spot. I think he's a really good play on this slate. Center position, Drew Eubanks draws the best matchup against Charlotte, but you can't play him. I'd much rather play Trey Lyles, the power forward position. Harry Giles, it's just minutes. It's just minutes. If he was going to get more minutes, I'd be more into him. You could possibly look at Jokic, who's in a really good matchup against the Warriors. But again, these Denver guys, is there enough? Thomas Bryant grades out okay from a matchup standpoint. Naz Reid grades out decently from a matchup standpoint. And so does Bismack Biyombo. Outside of that, the center position is really underwhelming as far as key names in really good matchups. So we have to look a little bit deeper into that. And that's kind of what we do on the deep dive is we take a deeper look past just matchups, DVP, and overall defensive player matchups. Right now, my rankings go a little bit like this. I've got De'Aaron Fox, Terry Rozier. I like Ricky Rubio and Lonzo Ball. And then Shake Milton is a guy I've played all year. I'm going to continue to play him here. The Lakers just don't – until the Lakers show they can play defense at an elite level, Milton just scored a ton of fantasy points against the Clippers, who are a sound defensive team. I have no problem rolling Shake Milton out here, and it gives us a late-night hammer. That's kind of where I'm at right now with the point guard position. There's obviously some other players to consider, but that's my top 5 at the moment. As always, you can always check in with me on the NBA Live video we do on YouTube Live every day leading up to lock, or hop into Scored for an update on these player rankings as well. The shooting guard position, I really like Russell, really like Smart. I like Galidas Alexander in the narrative here. Excuse me. I do like Booker, especially with the fact that Oubre is going to be out. Van Vliet is doubtful. With Van Vliet doubtful, I think Norman Powell becomes a really good play. You can also look at Terrence Davis on that team to pick up some usage. And then I've got Bradley Beal and Drew Holiday kind of rounding it out. Small forward position, Jaylen Brown and Gordon Hayward are 1 and 2. Ingram is 3. Van Vliet now listed as doubtful, so that's the news that just broke across our wire. I got LeBron James in this mix, Pascal Siakam. That's kind of where it rounds out. I like the mid-tier plays. There is some value. You can look at the Value Street article for that. There's some good value across the board today. And you can look at that piece, Value Street, on our website. The power forward position, there is some value here, and it almost feels like to be contrarian, you pay up, and to be chalky, you just load up some mid-tier guys. Harry Giles, Belitza, in matchups against Washington, those are good matchups. Jeremy Grant, this guy at 4,400 is just too cheap. You could, kind of roll those 3 value guys and tag team them with Zion. I think Zion's in a really good spot. And Anthony Davis as well, who's now probable. The center position, it's ugly. I don't like a lot of centers today. I am interested again in Alex Len. And I'm going to talk about Alex Len in just a minute. But I really like DeAndre Ayton a ton. I think Enes Kanter is sneaky in tournaments. I'm going to have some exposure to Jokic for the simple fact that if Golden State can find a way to make the game competitive, I think Jokic has a monster game against them and Marquise Chris. And Mason Plumlee is my sneaky play of the day. If you've listened to this deep dive podcast long enough, you understand that when there's a blowout possibility with a Denver team, I'm going to play Mason Plumlee. The guy can play 15 minutes and get you a double-double, and then if the game blows out, he can really go nuts. And nobody plays him. Little shout out to Coke Zero there. It gets me through this busy day of DFS. So that's kind of where I'm at from player rankings. I want to talk about Alex Len just briefly because I've been on Alex Len since he was traded. He came back after, he didn't play when he was traded right away. And then you see that the minutes are trending up. So he's traded. The deadline was February the 6th, I believe, was the trade deadline. He's traded. He doesn't play for like 3 weeks. Comes back against the Clippers, plays 16 minutes. I was just all over him against the Warriors on February 25th. He only had 11.3 fantasy points in 15 minutes. And then you look at the last 3 games, 21 minutes, 16 minutes, and 27 minutes. The usage is up, the rebounds are up, the points are up, and the block shot upside is massive. 38.6 fantasy points against Detroit in their last game 2 days ago on March 1st. So at 4,800, I think that people stay away from him because of the minutes. The game log watchers, the drive-by research guys will stay away from him. But we know Washington is terrible against centers. They're terrible against anybody who can rebound. And they just truly don't have a big man. They're running out kind of 4 guys with Thomas Bryant, Jan Mahamini, Paseknis, he's gotten run. Moritz Wagner, he's gotten run. And when you look at Thomas Bryant, yes, we know the upside of Bryant, but he's just struggled with injuries and he's not really playing more than 15 minutes. Which, by the way, at a 3.9 price tag, I think you can give him a little bit of consideration in a deep field tournament. Like if you're playing this $3.33 tournament, maybe put him in a couple of your lineups because in each of the last 2 games, he's had at least 20 fantasy points at a 3.9 price tag. We only need 24 fantasy points to kind of get you a 6X. And if he does play 20 minutes tonight and gets back to playing closer to what he was playing, which was 25 to 31 minutes, he has a ceiling, of almost 50 fantasy points. That floor goes up probably to the 26, 27 point mark, which makes him a really good play. So I don't mind either one of those centers in that Washington-Sacramento game. This is kind of where I'm at right now on the slate. We're still waiting on a little bit of news. Some of the statistics that we need to look at when we're looking at things on a slate like this is usage, right? We need to make the correlation between usage, high usage players that are getting minutes that are in good matchups. LeBron James is the highest usage player at point guard. Of course, he's not listed as a point guard on FanDuel, but he's a much better buy on FanDuel tonight at 10.5. than he is on DraftKings at 11.4, especially with the availability of Anthony Davis, and he's been marked as probable now. So, at point guard, uh, actually eligible point guard guys, it's De'Aaron Fox. He's got a 30 usage rate and a killer matchup, and really my favorite play at the point guard position, to be honest with you. Shooting guard, when we look at minutes, we look at usage. Bradley Beal, the price tag of 10.3, I think it keeps people away. Paul George is sneaky. He's listed as a small forward. 6,800 on FanDuel. The usage rate is 30.7. The matchup's not great. His production's been terrible. He's playing 29.1 minutes per game, and he's averaged 29.8 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. So he's averaged right about a fantasy point per minute. And if this was a better matchup, then I'd be more in on it. But to me, I think that the guy who's going to get the biggest increase in minutes is a guy like Devin Booker. He's playing 35.7 minutes per game, averaging 37.8 fantasy points over the last 2 weeks, 41.2 fantasy points per game for the season. He's got a usage rate of 30%. It is Toronto, and I've been saying all year, Toronto is not the same team from a defensive standpoint that they were last year when they had Kawhi Leonard, and everybody kind of seems to want to stay away from them and not target them. But that's off reputation. It's not off reality. So Booker, I think he gets a usage increase without Oubre. I think Ricky Rubio also gets a bit of an increase, and Mikal Bridges is a guy that gets an increase as well. When we look at the small forward position from a usage standpoint, it's Kawhi Leonard and it's Brandon Ingram. I mean, those guys, huge, massive usage totals and really good matchups tonight. Kawhi Leonard is a 1.52 fantasy point per game player, playing 32.1 minutes a game, averaging 46.6 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. The problem with that is that's barely 5x. So do you want to spend up for Kawhi? Do you think the upside is there in a matchup against Oklahoma City that's kind of a grind down type game? For me, it's a fade. I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to look to probably pay down with my power forward spot. Speaking of power forwards from a usage standpoint, Zion, Anthony Davis, and Pascal Siakam. Siakam is one of my favorite plays in the slate. I just have a feeling this is a really good spot for him. He's a long defender. He's athletic. He can run the floor in a fast tempo type of game. The usage rate of 28.1%. You look at the power forward position in the Phoenix Suns, they're 26th in the NBA as far as points given up to power forwards. I think it's a really good spot for him. The center position, there's going to be no surprise here that Jokic is the guy, right? I mean, Jokic 27.5, it's a really good matchup. It's just, can this game stay close enough, and do you need to pay up there? Ayton, he's in a good spot as well. For me, it's Ayton. And then these other guys I talked about, you could talk about Harry Giles, you could talk about Alex Len, possibly Thomas Bryant. Maybe we see the minutes trend up a little bit more. But Bryant is a GPP play, an ultimate GPP play, because you don't know if the minutes are going to go up. And you're playing him banking on everybody thinking that you're playing him banking on the fact that the drive-by researchers are looking at the minutes and that we're going to get lucky. And without any news, he's going to get 2 to 3 minute bump and get you 25 to 26 fantasy points at his price tag. So it's a limited exposure thing, and it's kind of a leap that we're taking with that play. That's really where I'm at. That's really where I'm at in the slate. If you have any questions at all on my rankings, and if they change, check out our NBA live video that will go live with at about 3:15 Pacific time, 6:15 Eastern. Check out the website, dfscheat.com. We've got a ton of talent. We've got NHL, all kinds of stuff up for that. NBA, all kinds of stuff up for that. NASCAR, PGA content is up right now. Our PGA Core Plays article will be up later on tonight for the Arnold Palmer Invitational. I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Deep Dive. Until then, be cool, keep it cashing. Peace out.